Are you new to DevOps? And is this something that you still not quite understanding when it comes to DevOps? In this podcast, we're going to be discussing all things DevOps and just how to get started and what DevOps actually means. Hi, guys, my name's Tish. I'm a junior DevOps engineer, and this is the podcast series DevOps 101, where we discuss all things DevOps and usually go through things from a sort of junior perspective and, simplify things for you guys to understand what things actually mean. So, we've been going through, if you're new to this, you can see that I have a YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel is TechyTish, and you can see DevOps videos. And I just thought I'd start this podcast just to talk about a range of different topics that I think is better doing live, and I can answer some questions at the end of the podcast so that you guys, are sort of interacting with myself. So, what is DevOps? Essentially, DevOps is a practice, it's a method. I wouldn't really say it's so much a job title or a job role. It's that practice between developers and operations and the combination of the both. So if we want to simplify it, essentially we've got developers, right? And developers are the people that are writing code to write an app, let's say. So they're creating a product using code. When they commit or when they commit that code to a repository, they need to have tools installed. So before they do the commit, actually, let's go further step back. Before they make the commit, they need to be able to build the app locally so that they can ensure that what they're coding is correct, and it works locally before they make the commit. So then once they make the commit, they push all that code, and then this is where operations come in. Operations are like, okay, this is where we're going to take that code and make sure that it's pushed into an environment. Now, operations guys deal with the maintenance of the infrastructure, and they deal with sort of like the back end processes stuff of a product. Previously, you got developers and ops, and when they're often doing their own things and they need to come together, this is where the issue lies. You have them sort of interchangeably, they're not communicating very well. And this is where DevOps come in, and this is where business is like, right, we need to actually get someone or people doing the things that make the dev and the ops come together. And this is where that DevOps cycle comes. So, a little bit about myself. I am a junior DevOps engineer, and I have been since November 2021. And I am new to the process, but I'm also learning, and I'm also, I'm taking on board, and I'm actually wearing sort of the DevOps hat, I'd say now. Whereas before I was still sort of like, I come from operations sort of background, so it's sort of, I still wasn't 100% sure what it kind of meant to be DevOps. And if you're new and you don't have any IT experience, let's say you're coming from a completely different sector, such as like finance or whatever it may be, and you've never had an IT job, you've never done any sort of courses or have any education when it comes to IT or coding, then what I'd say is do a little bit of research on what it means, what DevOps actually means, and take that with a sort of pinch of salt, because someone else is probably going to explain to you what DevOps means to them in a slightly different way. But overall, you basically just want to able to automate the process of getting a bunch of code to deployment for an environment. whether it's a production environment, test, you just want to be able to get that code, someone's laptop, to the environment, all plain sailing. And this is where all the DevOps tools comes in between. So you can't just click a button and then, hope that all that code is somehow magically going to get into an environment. You have to set up the environment, you have to maintain the environment, you have to script out ways to automate the processes in between getting the deployment, getting that deployment live. So I thought that when I was starting this, really, when I was starting DevOps, I kind of just all I heard was pipeline. Like the first thing that people were saying were pipelines, like, oh, to automate the process, you need to pipeline. Now that seems very like for someone who doesn't know what DevOps is, that seems really like it's kind of like a buzzword. It's thrown at you and you're expected to understand what it means. Essentially, the pipeline is that process that I explained earlier. So to commit to from the person's code, getting that into deployment, that process is CI/CD, which is continuous integration and deployment. So you're committing those changes, those code changes to an app. So whether you're making an app, whether you're updating an app, whatever it may be, you're continuously coding. The developers are continuously doing that because, of course, they've got to make changes. And then we also need to continuously deploy those changes. And once you get into that sort of steady flow, then it's all good. But in order to do that, this is where pipelines come in, because usually you press a button, you will physically press a button to commit, right? And what you want to do is when you make that commit, you want that process automated, that no one's and sorry, putting my charger. So and essentially you want to be able to understand pipelines. I'd say the first thing after sort of, developing an understanding of what DevOps actually means, the next thing would be to actually pick up some knowledge on pipelines and sort of run with that. And I've got some links in the description for all the DevOps sort of courses that I took for getting my job. And that sort of leads me on to sort of the next bit, which is when you then start getting into the DevOps, right? You start hearing the buzzwords again, infrastructure code, containerization, scripting languages. You start hearing all of these words and you're thinking, where the hell? You're probably thinking, where the hell do I start? And simply put, check out one of my other videos on my YouTube channel, but simply put, you just need to be able to understand what DevOps is. Then, once you've understood it, follow one of my courses, one of my YouTube videos, which details exactly what sort of steps you need to take in terms of DevOps tools and cloud technologies. And that's that's literally it in a nutshell. Like if you start doing that and start implementing your own projects using DevOps tools to implement your own project, you can really excel in CV, and you can show recruiters like, look, I have this sort of understanding and I want to push on that. And essentially when I was doing my CV, I had no DevOps experience, like professionally. In like I've never had any employment in DevOps, so I had to tell, I had to basically tailor my CV so that it had made it look more like I sort of knew what I was talking about, kind of thing, or like showcase the tools that I was learning. So once I'd done that, that's when I started getting like calls back and stuff like that. And really, you want to, you want to be able to also understand different areas of DevOps. So if we look at DevOps as an overview, if you think of that as sort of like a subject area, and within that subject area, there's loads of different tools and technologies that make a DevOps life cycle or DevOps practices or methods. And when I was looking at when I was starting out with DevOps, I thought that, maybe I needed to get stuck into Python, or, so, I didn't know where to start when it came to especially programming and scripting languages. Didn't even understand why the programming languages, scripting languages are even used. And essentially, um, there's a lot of programs, and there's a lot of things. There's a lot of people that will say, okay, go ahead and learn Linux, go ahead and learn Python, whatever. And really, you want to just pick pick it up and just do it. If you pick up Python and you're thinking all of the tutorials regarding Python are just all about making apps or like little web apps, stuff like that. It's not about the application. When you're doing these tutorials, it's not about application you're building, it's about the information and knowledge that you retain from learning through those tutorials. Because I could tell you for 100%, DevOps is not about creating no apps. It's not about creating apps, um, or creating websites, or it's about using code to automate the build process. So the tools that developers need to test an app locally, that they're great for a product, they need to be able. Usually, if the tools are not installed, we need to like, go on the command line, install them, or through the website or GUI or whatever. But when it comes to deploying that code to an environment, the environment are just a bunch of servers or virtual machines. You need to tell that environment, look, in order to even spin up this product, X, Y, and Z tools. So that's where your knowledge of programming will come in, because you will need to be able to write these scripts to automate the process on that virtual machine, because no one's going to be on the virtual machine, like physically installing stuff. They're all just virtual. Really shouldn't be accessed unless maintenance thing. And and I think that's really it. That's really it in a nutshell for automation, I'd say. Get into the real nitty gritty bits of automation in a separate podcast. For this one, we just want a sort of overview of what the automation aspect of DevOps is. And it literally is just that. It's just automating certain processes to enable that CI/CD flow. And I think when we talk about CI/CD and DevOps, and you hear these around companies, it's really a cultural change. I'm fortunate enough that the company that I work for, the product team that I work for in that company, they are literally building an app, a web app from scratch, and they've already got a version 1 using old and outdated technology. And version who's got the fancy um, cloud platform, microservices, and all the DevOps tools and all that kind of stuff. So I'm in that position where I'm helping decisions to be made. I'm learning alongside my senior colleagues. We're setting out the foundation of DevOps for how our organization should work as a whole across the product teams. And usually you probably join a company, all of these things are already sort of flashed out. So I'm fortunate enough for that. So that means that I can experience this firsthand, what a cultural change like the organization. Like, how does that impact other product teams and other teams in general, like other teams, how they work, how we work, how everyone's working together, and all the collaboration that involves. We we have all these things and that are changing, and it's important, and it's also really it can be a shock to organizations. And but DevOps to me is the future, and that's just it's the future of getting businesses getting there faster, getting what they want faster, essentially. So, and we're always continuously learning. We're always, even like my colleagues who have been doing it for 5 years, whatever, they've continuously learning, and that's what I love about DevOps compared to my previous experience I was in before, and felt like the I'd reached the peak of that job role. And when you've reached the peak, nothing really challenges you anymore at that job role. So I feel like it's important for me to pick a career and to pursue that career, knowing that 5 years, in 20 years' time, I'm not going to be bored, and I can be really well rounded in an area of DevOps, but I still have something else around the block that I need to learn. You know what I mean? So I'd say that, keep that in mind. If you want to be a DevOps engineer, you still need to actually be keeping up to date with your tools and technologies, and also actively, sort of researching these things and being part of that and wearing that DevOps hat. Like, you can't really, I can't see someone being a DevOps engineer and just using the tools and technologies that they have learned for however many years, and they're not changing. I'm not saying if your company has as your Kubernetes, and then in 10 years time there's another sort of version of Kubernetes that you could migrate over to. I'm not saying that you should go ahead and migrate over. What I'm saying though is that be aware of it. Be aware of the upcoming changes. Maybe it will benefit your organization. Maybe. So, keep those thoughts in mind when you're if you're actively pursuing a career in DevOps, because there's a lot to think about, and it's not just a career change. It's also it will become sort of ingrained in sort of lifestyle, and um the way how you think, and so just keep that in mind. So how to actually get started? How do you get started with DevOps? And I touched on it before. You can go ahead and check out one of my videos on YouTube. My channel is TechyTish. I'm currently live streaming these podcast episodes on YouTube, actually, and these will be available on Spotify if you just happen to want to listen to it without watching the stream. And essentially, there is really only one way to start, and that is to just start. Now, even if it's not watching one of my videos and it's watching someone else's videos, or if you feel empowered to go on a boot camp, by all means do. I do believe though that you don't really need to be spending hundreds, of pounds or thousands of pounds, dollars, or whatever your currency is. You do not need to be spending that much money really on getting started and getting into it and learning. You can do these things absolutely free, following YouTube courses and videos. And you could also just use Udemy course and pay you the few pounds it is to get those courses for life as well. And I'd say you want to just start with the basics. And the basics are understanding what DevOps is, picking up Python, picking up Linux, and also picking a cloud provider. Now, the reason why I say cloud provider is because even though you're not a cloud engineer, a cloud engineer is quite different from a DevOps engineer. You still want to be able to, I don't know how to put it. Like if you're a DevOps engineer, you are working with a cloud platform, so you still want to be able to understand how that platform works. Now, my advice would be, if you are unsure whether to go down Azure or AWS or even Google Cloud Platform, pick the provider that your current company uses. And the reason for that is, if you pick current one that your company is using, you can essentially leverage yourself to maybe pick up some job duties in your company that are DevOps related. So if you know your company uses Azure, you can say to them, right, can I get involved with any DevOps tasks related to Azure? And you can even, if you've already got into infrastructure as code, you can even maybe start suggesting, oh, let's try deploying these things in this way, using this language or using this method or whatever. You can come up with suggestions and improvements to the way how a team or maybe someone is doing something that is DevOps related. And that will be really invaluable for you, and it'll be really good experience. And I did that. I tried to do that, but I actually got a bit of pushback, and I was told that it wasn't a part of my current job, which at the time, second line IT support. And so what I just did was I ignored what they said in a way, and I did it in my own time, but that landed me the job that I've got now. So even if for whatever reason your managers are like, no, we don't want you, you know, on something else. We want you to do what your job defined to do. Then just continue learning, and I guarantee you that when someone sees your TV, because you've been doing that in your own time, that actually is so much valuable than doing nothing or expressing it. And this sort of leads me into the backstory of was when I had decided, right, I'm going to pursue DevOps career now. Like, this is it. I'm sort of sick of IT support. I want to just go ahead and do the career. I actually applied for a junior DevOps engineer position about 6 months before I got my job that currently got. And the job, I made it through to the final stage. So I had an interview initially with the recruit, and then I had another interview, the first stage interview, and then I had the final. And the final stage interview I did not get, but the, the team at this organization wanted to they wanted to essentially uh, change the way that their contact center currently work. So I think they were using like Cisco technologies, and essentially they wanted to rebuild their contact center in AWS. So for this interview, I actually built my own contact center in AWS to showcase, look, I may not have any DevOps experience or any sort of boot camp, or I've not even looked at a tutorial of in really. Gone in AWS, created a free tier account and created this contact center with some Lambda functions and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't get the job, but I was surprised because I'd gone and put all this effort. Actually, the team leader who was interviewing for that job role had actually he had reached out to me on LinkedIn and connected with me after the interview. And he said, look, he loved you. He absolutely did love you. But the person who did get hired, they had actually just done a boot camp. And he had gave me some tips. He gave me some tips on resources to use and, just getting stuck in. And he said, guarantee you in 6 months' time, you'll be ready. You'll be ready. You'll have a job. And that's exactly what happened. So over the next 6 months after that rejection, I just continued. I just picked a couple of Udemy courses. I didn't go all out. I wasn't really learning containerization or anything or infrastructure code like deeply. I just picked a couple of courses that he recommended, and I picked Azure related courses because at the time when I was employed at the university as second line, I was doing they were using Azure. So I thought, and they were using Terraform for their infrastructure as code. So I thought, okay, we go get this um Azure knowledge so that I could then go to work and say, okay, I am an Azure expert. Let's go and do some DevOps. So yeah, and that was really it. So when you start off, you're gonna have bumps in the road, and you're gonna have loads of different things that happen to you, and essentially you're going to have these things that do not make any sense, and it won't may never make sense until you actually do that job. So what I would recommend is, if you do have these jobs and you have, if you do have these sort of experiences where you're thinking, oh, maybe DevOps isn't for me because it's too hard and all this stuff, and we'll be talking about just how hard DevOps actually is in the upcoming podcast, but you're gonna have a time where you feel like you're just not getting anything. That's absolutely normal. I think that's normal with a lot of if you're learning something new. It's not going to be straightforward. At least not DevOps. That's not straightforward. That, but it it gets better every day. Like every day I'm at work, I am just like I'm in awe of. I feel like I'm getting smarter. It's like I'm not by no means like a smart person. I'm more just I like I'm not trying to say like I'm not trying to dumb myself down. I'm just saying like I'm not really what you would define as IQ smart kind of thing. But like I think that um DevOps makes me feel intelligent. It makes me feel smarter. So I don't know. I think that's just something that I picked up, or that's just something that um and yeah, and I think when we are, when you're going through this journey, just make sure you have a support system around you that support you and support you on your journey, and absolutely sure you'll be fine. And that sort of leads me to the end of this podcast. And yeah, it's only been half an hour, but this is just an intro. And I just wanted to touch base on the things that we covered. So, covered what is DevOps? Why does DevOps even really exist? And in a short form. There's another podcast coming up soon on why DevOps engineers are actually needed, and we'll go into there. But we've covered what DevOps actually is and how to get started. And simply check out the links in the description, and I'm pretty sure you'll be on your way. Once you say on your CV, "Oh, I've done this course and it's taught me X, Y, and Z tools in relation to DevOps processes," then you'll be on. And if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for listening, and please don't forget to subscribe. And if you're watching on Spotify, if you're listening on Spotify, then please give the podcast a thumbs up, like. Thank you, and see you guys next time. Bye.